Alright, let's see what you did. What'd you do there? That hurt. Alright, see this right here. See that right there. Your eyes all swollen to hurt. Alright, buddy. Alright, I have a job to do. I've done this job once before. I'll show you how I accomplished that here in just a second on my other building. These are run-ins that we use for our horses. These are just some of these steel garages that you can get. And you can get them in all kinds of different configurations. In our particular case, what we did here is we closed it in on 3 sides. Both sides are closed in. We've also closed in the back, and then we've added windows. So it's just essentially a garage. I mean, you see these things all over the country, but they're also great as run-ins for the horses. And so this might be a little overkill in comparison to what a lot of people will use as a run-in, but for the price and the fact that the company comes out and puts them up for you, they're really hard to beat. But there is kind of in terms of using it as a run-in, there is a drawback, and that is at least something that we've come across. And that is that they have an overage of this metal on here. And I didn't realize when they did it that it would create this problem, or else I would have had them fix that. But anyway, in terms of the steel post that this siding attaches to, we have about an 8-inch area right there that this metal hangs over. Under normal circumstances, if you were just using it as a garage, it wouldn't really matter. But if you're using it as a run-in for horses, then as we just saw with Awesome, what they like to do is use it to scratch their neck and their head or their side or their butt, whatever. And what happens is that you have pieces like this that are sticking out, and invariably the horse is going to injure itself. And that's what happened with Awesome. It's happened to some of our other horses in the past, and I've had to fix it. So that's what is going to take place here, is I have a fix for this. More than likely that little injury he got right there. But anyway, it can be pretty nasty. They can cut themselves pretty bad. In that case, he was very, very close to his eye, and that could have been very bad. So this needs to be fixed, and it needs to be fixed now. And the way that I am going to fix this, and so this is the building in the other pasture here, and this is the way that I have fixed this in the past, is I have just cut off that excess metal that was hanging over, and then I put a board up in there. So if they're gonna scratch against anything, and you can see with all the hairs right here that they definitely do, then they're just gonna be scratching against this board, which is fine. But that's a solution that I've come up with on this one over here. And so you can see they're definitely rubbing up against this. They use it as a scratching post. And so that seems to keep them from, and then usually I just take this and kind of hit it with a hammer and kind of knock this in so there's no real sharp edges on there. But a much better solution than having that metal hanging out. All right, so I have already cut a spot from the other side right over here, kind of showing me where that beam comes down so that I don't cut into the beam. And so I'll just basically kind of come up and down through here and cut that excess off. And being that we're out here in the middle of the pasture and we don't have power out here, this is where this little tool comes in very handy. In fact, the last time I did this job over on the other building is why I bought this. So this little DeWalt 20-volt cordless grinder with a cutting wheel on there does a great job, and it worked great last time. And so let's get it going. All right, we got that taken care of. So I just cut that overlapping metal off of there, and just stick that board on there, drill some holes, put some sheet metal screws down through there, and it holds it on fine. It's the same way I did the other one, and it's been holding up fine. All right, so hopefully no more injuries. On to the next job. All right, so the real job that I had to get to today was that I need to address this 2000 Chevy 1500 Silverado. So now that I'm done taking care of the horse run-ins out there and our little injury that we had, this is my wife's 1500. And I just mentioned that it's a 2000, and it was her primary vehicle for a long time. I mean, you know, my wife's a farm girl. She's a cow girl, and she drove a truck for a long time, and she loves it. And then she ended up getting another vehicle, and then this thing kind of got relegated to being just a farm truck. And it wasn't taken out on the road very often at all. And then now it's pretty much 100% a farm truck. I never really wanted that for this truck. I have always, ever since I was a little kid, I have always loved the Chevy short bed pickup trucks. I just thought that they were the coolest thing ever. The late 60s, early 70s, giving my age away here big time, but the late 60s, early 70s Chevy short bed pickup trucks were like the muscle cars of trucks. They were awesome. You saw a lot of hot rods that were made out of those trucks. A lot of people did really cool things with them. They would soup them up. They would lower them. They would just trick them out, and I always loved them. And I've just always had a love for these trucks ever since I can remember. And I like this truck, and there's some things that need to be addressed, and that's what I'm going to do, is address all these little things that are going wrong with them, or it's going wrong with it. And I'm going to get this thing back to roadworthy again, and it is going to become my truck. And so after much negotiation with the missus and some exchange of monetary funds and some promises that I have no intentions of keeping, I am going to take over this truck, and I am going to fix all the things that are wrong with it right now, and I am going to keep this thing up and operating and in as pristine condition as I possibly can. This has the small V8 in it. For this year model, there were actually 3 engines that were available. There was a V6, there was a small V8, a 4.8 liter, and then there was a larger V8, a 5.3 liter. And this has the 4.8 V8 in it. And so it's got a water pump problem, so we haven't been taking it out on the road because you know, I didn't want her or myself getting stranded on it. It's got some electronic issues inside with the windows and the door locks. Let's see, the muffler needs to be replaced. It's got a gigantic hole in the muffler, and just a lot of little things, but none of them are all that unusual for these trucks, and they're all fixable. So I have got a whole stack of parts that have been coming in over the course of the last week or so. And so my new project, and I'm going to start with it today, is to start to fix all these things. I'm looking forward to this. I've been wanting to get my hands on this for a long time, but you know, I don't want to step on my wife's toes. This was her favorite truck, and you know, I didn't want to just come in here and take over and start doing stuff to it. But now she's gotten to the point where there's enough things wrong with it that she just said, here, take it, it's your truck, fix it. So it's one of those deals, guys. I just had to be patient and I had to wait her out. So anyway, what I have offered to do is I am going to offer up my baby Tundra to serve as the farm truck while I have this one down and in my shop, and I've got it in certain parts of disassembly. I'm going to put my little baby Tundra into the Tacoma. I'm going to put it into action. This is a 98. This belonged to my father for a long time, and when he passed away, I got this truck, and I love this truck. This thing is in perfect operating condition. In fact, it's my daily driver. I drive it back and forth to the airport every day, and it's a great little truck. So I am going to trust it as the farm truck for a period of time while I've got the Chevy down and out. We will put that big water tank in the back of the little Toyota there, and it'll serve as the farm truck for a minute. All right, so I've got the truck pulled into the shop, and so one of the main things that I want to do here is get to the water pump. Of course, the water pump's way down in there, and it's not that big of a deal. It just requires taking off this air intake right here, this fan shroud that's right here. It gives you pretty good access to it, and then the disassembly actually is not that bad. I am not going to get into all of that as far as showing you all the ins and outs of what to do with the water pump and all that, just simply because of the fact that there is a million videos on YouTube showing you how to do this. There's guys out there that are professional automotive mechanics, and they've got very detailed videos out there on how to do it and all that stuff. I'll show you the highlights and basically what I'm doing in terms of my renovation attempts on this truck, but I'm not going to get into every torque and what bolts you're taking out and all that, because there's really good videos out there on that. But anyway, I'm going to go ahead and start on getting to this water pump. I've already taken this line off right here. Like I said, I'm not going to go through all the details here about how to do this, but I've gone ahead and taken this top line off. Okay, so on this water pump job, just sticking with the highlights and not getting into all the intricacies of every single bolt and everything that you're taking off. You can see that I've kind of opened things up here quite a bit by just taking off this air intake, taking off this fan shroud right here. I've already taken off this water hose. And then probably the biggest thing that might pose a difficulty factor in this job is that you've got to get this fan clutch assembly off right here, and it actually threads on to this water pump pulley right here. And so there's various ways. There's a tool that you can use that actually goes into a couple holes down here so you can hold this. Your biggest thing is when you're trying to get this thing loose is that this whole pulley, belt, and tensioner and all that, it wants to rotate with it, and you can't get any leverage on it. There's a couple ways you can do it. Like I said, they have a tool that you can use. I don't have the tool, and so I just use the old-fashioned method. I just put a wrench on there just a second ago, and I smacked it with a hammer, and it broke it loose. So one of the tried and true methods of getting it loose is just the pure shock and awe approach, in which you just hit it with a hammer, and that worked for me. All right, so let's keep moving on. The next thing we're going to need to do is get this serpentine belt off, and so what you want to do is you want to come over here to the tensioner pulley. That's a 15 millimeter, and then you can see you put some tension on it and it rotates out of the way. And then let's see if I can do this with one hand. Yep, there we go. And then just pull the pulley, or I'm sorry, pull the serpentine belt off. Okay, so I went ahead and removed the tensioner pulley, which is located right there. It actually takes 3 bolts. And so what I need to do now is just get these 3 hoses off right here. and then I will be able to just pull this whole water pump assembly off. And it's going to take 6 bolts total. There's 3 right here, and then there's 3 right down in there somewhere. I can't see them all right now, but there's 6 of them total. 1, 2, 3, and then 1, 2, 3. All right, so let's get it done. Okay, so I got all of these hoses off right here. That big one right there is there, and then these are your heater hoses. This one and this one, which were taken off of these 2 locations right here. So now we're just going to get in here and take out the 6 bolts that are associated with the water pump, and then it should come right out. Okay, so we got that water pump out of there. Pretty easy process. So the only thing that needs to take place now is I'll come back in here, and so one of these water cavities right in here where that seal sits up in there, we'll clean all this off. Right here, there's another one right over there. I'll clean all that off and make that a nice mating surface. I have new seals that will go on there. And then this is another thing I wanted to check for while I had all of this out. I wanted to look down here. Here's your air conditioning compressor right here, and of course this is the dry belt for the air conditioning, and I wanted to see what kind of shape it was in. And it actually has a lot of cracks in it. You can kind of see them right down in here, and you can see another crack right there. So this belt will need to be replaced while I'm in here. There's just absolutely no reason not to do it while you have this kind of full access to it. And it's the same kind of deal. This is an idler pulley or a tension pulley right here. So you just kind of crank this thing up and it loosens up the belt, pull the belt off. And then while I'm at it, I'll look at the integrity of this idler pulley and see what needs to be done as far as changing out that pulley. But at a very minimum, I know that this belt is going to be replaced. Okay, so I just got this area right here all cleaned up where these 2 gaskets are going to go against the block right here. And I also cleaned it up down in there as well. Get that debris out of there. And then I also decided that I was going to replace the air conditioner belt while I was here. I noticed that it had a lot of cracks in it. And then when I got to looking at the tensioner pulley, which sits right down in here, it had some grinding on it. Wasn't terrible, but you know, while you're down here and you have access to this area, I'm going to go ahead and replace that tensioner pulley while I'm at it. And so grand total, everything that I'm going to be doing here is, of course, we already know the water pump. I have taken this thermostat off because I need to reuse the bolts, and I have put the new thermostat on the new water pump, and I've already put the bolts back on there. 22 foot-pounds is the ultimate torque that you're going to put on those. And then I have the other gaskets that are going to go on the new water pumps. And then, of course, I think I mentioned already, I've got a new serpentine belt. In addition to that, I have decided that I am going to replace the upper and lower radiator hose. Here is the tensioner pulley for the air conditioning. Here is the belt for the air conditioning, and then there is my serpentine belt tensioner right there. So grand total, those are the things that I'm going to do in addition to the water pump. So let's start getting all that stuff back on. Okay, so I got the new tensioner pulley back on there, and I got the new air conditioner belt on. So with all the surfaces clean and everything now, ready to put the water pump on. So let's get it on. Okay, so I just got the water pump sitting up here for just a second. I wanted to show you that I've placed the gaskets in their proper location. These come with the water pump. And then I've just loosely put in 2 of the bolts on each side of it just to hold the gasket in place, just so I can go ahead and slide it in and the gasket will stay in place, and then I can just thread these bolts in by hand momentarily to just hold everything where I need it until I can get in there and start tightening everything up. Okay, so everything's coming along pretty well. So like I mentioned earlier, I've got a new tensioner pulley right down there for the air conditioning belt, which is new as well. I put a new lower radiator hose on. I have a new upper radiator hose on. This will all get positioned in a minute. Once I get the fan on, I get the shroud on. And I put the new Serpentine Belt tensioner on. Put a new tensioner, or I'm sorry, a new belt on, as well as a tensioner. And I've got the water pump all on. So we're moving right along. So now I'll just go ahead and put the fan back on, and put the shroud on, put the upper radiator hose, fill everything up with antifreeze, and we should be on our way. So let's keep moving. Alright, so we got everything back together again. Got the upper radiator hose put on, got the fan shroud, got the air intake, and all the little runners and stuff like that attached. You got little attach clips all down in there. They're kind of hold off for hoses and electrical and all kinds of stuff. So anyway, we got all that put back on there. Now it's time to fill the tank up. And so I've got some I went ahead and bought some pre-diluted antifreeze, so you don't have to do all the 50-50 mixture and all that kind of stuff with distilled water, just to make it a little bit easier. So anyway, let's go ahead and fill this up to the cold level, which is really just right about there, and then start to go through the process of getting water running through this thing, getting the thermostat to open up, and getting everything flowing so I can check for leaks. Alright, so I added some coolant to the reservoir over there, the expansion tank, and then I went inside and I turned the heater on. And so now what I'm doing is I'm just trying to get everything warmed up enough to where I can get the thermostat to open. And if I can get the thermostat to open, then let me use my trusty little light here to demonstrate my point, I guess. And so anyway, these are the heater hoses right here. So when the thermostat, when the coolant gets warm enough, the thermostat's going to open. That's going to allow the warm coolant or the hot coolant to go through the heater coil. And then of course that's what's going to give us our heat in the cab of the truck. And then also when that happens, that's going to allow the coolant to circulate all the way through the system. And then as a result of that, now I've got the system completely full of the coolant. So that's what we're trying to do here, is just keep filling the reservoir enough, keep checking the level of it. I can actually, probably can't see it right here, but I can see that line right there. So it's become a little bit low as the engine is running and the coolant starting to circulate. And then as soon as it gets hot enough and it goes through the heater coil, then that means I have full circulation of all that fluid. And then I can raise the level of the reservoir at that point, and then that should be the proper level once we do that. So that's all we're trying to do. And then in the meantime, I'm just coming through and I'm checking all of my hoses that I have put back on, and making sure that I don't have any leaks. So I'm looking down there. That's the lower radiator hose that I replaced way down in there. And then just kind of coming over here to the side, looking down, and just making sure that I did everything the way that I was supposed to. Also looking at the water pump itself. And so in this picture right here, the water pump is right there. So I'm kind of looking at the back side of it and making sure that I don't have any obvious leaks. I'll look up underneath the vehicle here in just a second. And so I'm just going to sit here and let it run with the heater for a minute and let that antifreeze circulate all the way through and make sure that everything's good. All right, I got that water pump job done. And so, you know, obviously, as you saw during the video, I went in there and changed some additional hoses, some additional belts, some of the tensioner pulleys, and that kind of thing. And then I got the truck out today. I had to run some errands and put about 40 miles on it. My coolant level did drop just a little bit, which is to be expected. So when you get it out there on the road and you get it into operating temperature and that kind of thing, and the coolant is going to make its way into, you know, all of the nooks and crevices that it's going to go into, then you would expect that level to drop just a little bit, and it did. And so I just added that level back up, and that should be good. I'll just keep watching it here for the next couple of times that I drive it, but that should be it for a while. And then just in an effort to really clean this thing up, I ended up spending about $12 in quarters at my local hand wash car wash up here in our little town that we live in, and I got it all cleaned up, and I vacuumed it and all that kind of stuff. And I'm still in the midst of doing all the little detail stuff now. I'm gonna put the shiny stuff on the tires and some smell good stuff in the cab and all that kind of stuff. But yeah, so this is the first part of this restoration project on this 2000 Chevy. Getting that water pump and getting it roadworthy was the most important thing. And so now what I need to address is some of the electrical issues that are inside. They're not major. It's just one of those things that I'm probably going to end up having to just throw parts at. So the window regulators, the door lock switch, those kind of things is probably just going to be just throw a bunch of replacement parts at it and see you know, what fixes it. But anyway, I'm glad to have this done at this point. I love this little Chevy short bed, and I want this thing to be in perfect running condition, and so that's my attempt here. So as far as this part of the project is concerned, I'm going to call it done. On to the next job.